it's very clear that it's very much back in the media attention. The level of seizures across Europe is definitely up. The purity levels, so the amount of prevalence, so the numbers of people using cocaine is also up as well. And that's found out partly by doing surveys, but also through wastewater analysis as well. It also appears to be the figures show that the numbers of people seeking treatment for cocaine misuse are also significantly up as well. So all those things are certainly worth bearing in mind, that that's what's going on. It's not just across Europe, of course. There's been a number of different headlines that we've seen recently that are certainly more local. And there's been a number of significant fines by Gardaí over recent months. And here's just a selection of headlines that I've taken from the last couple of years based in Galway. As usual, it's a little bit difficult to kind of see the reporting and to split it from how they put the sort of puns and everything else into it. So describing it as a blizzard and snowing is probably not too helpful. So we really need to get down to kind of an understanding as to what actually is going on. It's quite interesting with cocaine that there's a long culture and history that's going on, and many people will know, and it's still an urban myth out there, that there's cocaine in Coca-Cola. Well, there certainly hasn't been since 1929. That is quite certain. Although interestingly, Coca-Cola still import 100 tons of coca leaf a year to act simply as flavouring and nothing more. But I think the fact that it's been very much part of culture and society, and indeed merchandise products for many a long year, has basically some kind of impact in terms of how we view that particular drug, that particular product. And it's also true in terms of films and TV series out there. So there's a whole culture around the use of cocaine. I'm currently in the middle of watching Narcos season 3, which is quite enthralling. I'm just getting to the last episode, but certainly that again feeds into people's perception of what the drug is about. And I think it's fair to say that it gives it often perhaps a sheen of glamour or gloss about it, which again is something to bear in mind when we're actually dealing with this, that it's in some ways different to some of the other drugs that we deal with. And I think it's reasonable as well. It's not exactly a great piece of crystal ball gazing to say that the use of cocaine is likely to increase just from a cultural point of view, because rather like 100 years ago after the Great War, and obviously it was Armistice Day today, and the influenza, amazingly, that sort of resonance of history 100 years ago, there was a great outpouring in the 1920s of that desire to have a good time and parties. And, you know, it was nicknamed the Roaring Twenties. And it might well be that we're in for a similar kind of thing over the next few years as the pandemic lessens and nightclubs and festivals and everything else get back into gear. It's also entered the language, of course, and there's a whole vast range of slang that is out there. One that Kenneth might not be aware of is schnockter, and I hope I've said that right in terms of Irish. And for those that don't know, I believe it just means snow. Quite interesting, one of the leading figures in the UK kind of brings this together in many ways by really making a very kind of clear point that it's quite complex, but you know the point is very much is how is it as a society the use of some drugs and used in particular ways seems to be more tolerated, but others are not. And that's a very complex question. And I think it's the relationship to what is going on and the context to the individual user, which is something that Kenneth has very much been involved with. And I'm really looking forward to hearing his views on that. As regards prevalence, looking at the figures at the moment, Irish figures appear to be significantly above the European average levels. Now, our figures are from a few years back, but even taking that into account, the use of the drug in this country very often is significantly above the European levels. So in terms of lifetime use, we're talking about having it used at least once in their lifetime between those age ranges. It's a bit closer in terms of last year use among younger people. But even so, it is very clear that we are significantly on the higher side compared to our European counterparts. You may wonder why I've got pictures of baked beans up here. This is really just to illustrate what is happening in terms of the drugs market, but particularly in terms of cocaine, in that we're getting within the market, we get a split in terms of the market and in terms of the consumers are. So if you think of it in terms of baked beans, you can have your very, very cheap off-the-shelf baked beans, the sort of value range. You can have your kind of standard, and you can have what's being marketed as somehow some kind of superior, purer, better, perhaps, in terms of the marketing form of baked beans. The same is true of beer. You have your standard drink. You have your sort of dirt cheap, non-branded type, and then you have something which have an allure of something more. And I'm trying to, by analogy, to kind of say this is also happening in the cocaine market as well. Also, within terms of the cocaine market as well itself, we do see this quite a connection here between improved forms of delivery. And what I mean by that is drug dealers delivering to people on an individual basis and being, in fact, far more kind of reactive and on the ball in terms of delivery than even something like a pizza company. And that was an interesting bit of work done by the Global Drug Survey a few years back that compared the two. In terms of concerns about cocaine, there's several. One of the biggest is this combination of cocaine with other drugs, and in particular alcohol. So you get the production of cocoethylene within the body, which is several times stronger than either drug alone, and also can last significantly longer as well. And this is more likely to lead to a medical emergency situation. With also this combination with other drugs, and in particular, we've noticed in Galway a combination of people combining cocaine with ketamine as well, which again, as always, combining different drugs together tends to heighten the risks involved. And this is really just a summary to kind of say what is more likely to lead to a hospital situation, what is more likely to lead to an emergency situation. Certainly the combination of different drugs, and I've already mentioned ketamine and alcohol, there can be others as well, but they're the two we would certainly highlight. Certainly the amount of a drug being used is always a factor, and we also have to combine that with the purity involved as well. You know, obviously something that is sort of 30% pure puts a certain strain on the heart. If there is a batch that is then double that is 60% pure, obviously that's going to put more strain on the individual user, and their individual heart, etc. It's also possible, very, very possible, in fact, that any cocaine is adulterated with other substances. And very often it can be those substances which are just as toxic and problematic as the cocaine itself. Stress is also increased in terms of where it's used. So if people are exercising, physical activity, and I think within that we can include sex as well, then again, that's putting even more strain on the heart and is more likely to be problematic. Cocaine users entering treatment, this is the latest figures we've had from the EMCDDA. And again, we're seeing an increase in terms of the figures in terms of people entering treatment. It appears to be very often that the average age is in the sort of mid-30s. In terms of first entry into looking for treatment. And it's overwhelmingly men who are looking for treatment. And as you can see from the figures on the right there, they tend to be using, maybe not daily, but certainly close to daily, certainly greater than once a week would be the norm in terms of those people looking for treatment. And again, I don't know if that's replicated in terms of the clients Kenneth deals with, but I'm sure he'll be telling us. So just to finish up there before I move on to a second speaker, certainly some of the future of the market that we're looking at, there is a concern there that there will be a spike in overdose cases, particularly when cocaine is combined with other drugs, basically from the drug dealer themselves adding in other drugs. We're also seeing highest levels of purity over the past decade. And again, that's more likely that it leads to a higher risk situations being more common. We also might see, in terms of the particular issues of this drug, being more specialized treatments available for the particular drug rather than entering into general drug treatment.